Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the 2011 Tecmo Bowl Season 5 recap. So we've already covered the AFC conference. Now we're going to hop in and take a look at the NFC. We're going to start off in the NFC Bowl division. You got the Dolphins at 5-1, who just lost their first game of the season against Cleveland. And then you have the Browns at 2-4 and the Seahawks at 2-4. The Dolphins, second best offense in the game, and they've only given up 22 points in those 6 games, which is third best in the league. So it's an impressive start for them.
Despite that, I actually thought that the Dolphins this entire season have just been hanging on by a string. They've had wins just at the end where Dan Marino comes out of nowhere and pulls the game out at the end.
Key drives, yeah.
I think if this was any other season, they'd be 3-3 or 2-4. But
yeah,
you know, they've just kind of gotten all the breaks this season. They're 3-1 in conference. Again, I think the hugest thing for Miami is that their defense has only allowed 22 points.
Sure, lights out play.
I mean, that's just. For the Dolphins, usually they win by outscoring people, which they also have the second best scoring offense in the game this season, so it isn't like they're not scoring. But their defense giving up 22 points is just, to me, it just seems like a mirage, but it also shows that they've been playing really well this season. So Offerdahl and some of the guys there and Bosa and those guys are really having huge seasons, so they need to keep it up as we go along here. The Browns are 0-2 on the road. They continue to be the classic underachievers in Tecmo Bowl, and they really just need to pick it up. Their offense has struggled this season. All the points that they've scored basically have been on the back of McNeil, who's the best kick returner in the game, and we're pretty much at a place where if McNeil doesn't get a return into the opponent's territory, the Browns aren't scoring.
Yeah, the Browns, really historically for us, they've really underachieved on offense. Usually they have a pretty good defense. It's at least middle of the pack like this year, but points have been hard to come by. Seahawks, 2-4. They've really been up and down, win a game, lose a game. They completely blew out the Giants 31-0 in like probably the biggest head scratcher we've ever seen. I think that was more the Giants really just melted down in that game. The Seahawks came out with one big drive. And then just this recent week, in week 6, the Raiders just smashed the Seahawks. I think the score was like 20-3, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. So they've really been up and down, win a game, lose a game. So you don't really know what you're going to get out of them. They literally lack consistency.
The Seahawks have always been kind of Jekyll and Hyde. They're a team who, if their offense can get rolling, they can do some things. Their offense is fairly decent most of the time.
At times it's hard to defend, really.
I think the big thing for them, and this is where they were lucky in the Giants game, and this is kind of why their offense was able to put up 31 points. If they have to drive, they're not very good.
Sure.
If they have a short field, they will punch you in the face.
Yeah.
And the problem is, and the reason for that is they have one of the worst punters in the game, if not the worst punter in the game, in Rodriguez. He's horrible. So if it's a field position game, Seattle's going to lose almost every time. Their special teams generally just stink. Their kick return blocking is horrible, although Jefferson's had a great year so far. But beyond it, because their punter's so bad, if you get them in a game where they have to drive, you get them in a game where it's field position, you're going to beat Seattle almost every time. What happened in that Giants game, what happened in their other win was they had a bunch of short fields, and if you give that offense short field, Kurt Warner and the gang, they can do some stuff on offense. I will say this: probably the biggest disappointment this season defensively has been the play of Fred Young, who is generally an all-star
one-time league MVP. Yeah,
generally an all-pro, and he has just had a horrific season thus far, and he's not getting much help from the Boz on the lower back half there. So
yeah, Young's had 2 monster games against I believe the Giants and the Broncos, and then pretty much been a non-factor in a lot of other games. Let's switch gears quick and we'll jump down to the AFC Bowl division. You got the Raiders at 4-2. Cowboys surprising us for sure at 4-2, and then you got the Broncos bringing up the rear at 1-5.
Yeah, the key thing here in the NFC Bowl division is that I honestly think the Raiders, despite the fact that the Dolphins are 5-1 and the Raiders are 4-2, I actually think the Raiders have been the better team this season. The Raiders have probably been the second best team in the game this season so far, next to only the Bears would be my contention, I guess. The Raiders are 3-0 in conference, and actually so are the Cowboys on the other end are 3-0 in interconference play. So they both have different strength. The Cowboys' strength has been playing teams outside of the conference, and the Raiders have eaten up the conference so far. So
yeah, the Raiders are the thing with the Cowboys is they're 3-0 interconference, but those have been huge wins against San Francisco, against New York. Just games we thought they would start like 0-3, and instead they were 3-0. The Raiders, they have already played their two most difficult games at New York, at Chicago. They did lose both those games, but they've pretty much been working over everybody else.
And that's bad for the rest of this conference for the following reason. Because by far and away of the 12 teams, the Raiders have the easiest road the rest of the way.
I believe so.
They have the easiest schedule in the last 6 games. Looking at it,
a lot of home games. So the Raiders will be player 1, and there's a vast difference from when they're player 1 to player 2. So
I'll give you a little hint. The Raiders have played one team with a winning record so far this season for the rest of the season. And the only team they play that has a 500 record is the worst of the 500 teams, Washington.
Yeah.
So their toughest game for the rest of the season is probably Washington. And they still will be favored in that matchup. So.
And in terms of trying to get the number 1 seed, the Dolphins are 5-1, but they've played a lot of home games in the first half of the season. So Miami's set to go out on the road, and it's a case of a lot of the maybe half of those wins they pull out at home are going to end up being losses on the road. So as long as the Raiders can hold off the Cowboys, I really feel like they are probably the odds-on favorite right now to capture the 1 seed.
As far as the Cowboys go, and I honestly think Herschel Walker, if not the offensive MVP of the league this season, he's way up there. He has had an insanely monster year, just out of the backfield in the shotgun play and running the ball. He has just been a monster. He's been impossible to tackle, especially on the shotgun play. He's turned what should be a 5-yard pass play into 15, 20-yard gains all season long. And again, the only person he's really battling out for the offensive MVP in that conference so far is probably Dan Marino, just because he's had such a huge season so far.
But Dan's been clutch.
So both the Raiders and Cowboys are 4-2, and both of them have just played really well defensively, way above their station defensively. Neither one of them is a super strong defensive team, but they played really well. And their offensives are used to being awesome, and they have been so far this season. I would suspect both those teams will probably pass up the Dolphins record-wise, and I would think the Raiders and Cowboys might be 1-2 in the conference when this is all said and done.
Yeah, record-wise. So, and we haven't touched on the Broncos are 1-5
because they don't really deserve to be touched on.
93 points allowed, worst in the league.
That's 15.5 points a game, and honestly, in Tecmo Bowl, if you give up 15.5 points a game, well, it's not possible to give up a half, but if you give up 15 points a game, you're going to lose about 99% of the time.
Sure. So, and the Broncos they've actually hung in a couple tough games against San Francisco and Chicago, which they came up short. But other than that, they just really haven't had much of a pulse. So we're kind of a non-factor in the conference.
Big storylines, I guess, to finish out the rest of the season. Will the Dolphins hold on to the first place spot? Will it be the Raiders or Cowboys that jump them? And could somebody else, like maybe the Browns, figure out how to win a game?
Maybe the Browns, for the first time in probably since season 1, maybe they can at least reach 500 records. So. Well, thanks for tuning in. It's the end of the first half recap, so we got to get busy playing some more Tecmo Bowl games.